And I was down in Broward County recently, and these photos were taken at Butterfly World in Coconut Creek, and their beautiful bridal wreath vine is blooming, as their orchids and bromeliads are too. So thank you all for chiming in there. And thank you for bearing with us as we keep going through our COVID measures. I want you to continue to do your continuing education credits and try to volunteer if you can, but take leadership and trust in the leadership from your extension agents. We want to get you back and healthy and volunteering, but we have to make sure that we're all being as safe as possible. So keep growing. And Lynn Barber is our presenter today. Next month's webinar is March 25th, and it's going to be a Victory Gardening update. So it's going to be talking about the Victory Garden program that started in 2020 with Erin Harlow, Maxine Hunter, and Tia Silvasi. So that's going to be our presentation for next time. And surprise, not surprise, you all have been expecting this, but VMS is phasing out as of basically early next month. And you will be getting your new username and password for our new volunteer management software called Better Impact. And your coordinators have been training up this week, and we are going to be making that transition. So please be patient and bear with us. It is a good platform, and there are excellent training videos, and we're here to answer questions, but it's all a learning process. We're all learning together as we go forward with the Better Impact. And we will all be experts in just a few months, I promise, but change is hard, and we're going to be getting proficient at this. All of us are at the same time. So hang in there with us. We're gonna have a much better volunteer management system, and I think you're going to really like it. There is an app for your phone, so that's a nice benefit, and we will be able to push text messages to you also. So it's going to be a really neat volunteer management system for the future. So thank you for that. Today's speaker is Lynn Barber. Lynn is the Florida Friendly Landscaping Agent in Hillsborough County. That's down in Seffner, beautiful Seffner, or Mango, or Thononothatha. I don't know if I said it right. And Lynn has her master's degree in environmental horticulture from UF, and she has been an agent or associated with the Extension Service. First, she was a master gardener, believe it or not, and then she worked at the Discovery Gardens there in Hillsborough County Extension, and then has been the Florida Friendly Landscaping Agent for many years. She is an excellent friend. She is a lot of fun to be around, and she's a serious scientist too. The bottom right photo there is Lynn and Susan Haddock from Hillsborough County presenting at a conference in Sweden a couple of years back. So she is quite the expert in Florida Friendly, and when we think Florida Friendly landscaping, who's the expert? Lynn is certainly one of our top favorites for that. So Lynn, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and let you share, and you can get going with your presentation.
I'm trying.
Okay.
Share screen.
There it is.
Well, there we go. All right, so getting your garden to green, how to create a more Florida-friendly landscape. Okay, so we're going to talk about how you can be more efficient as a gardener when you consider reduce, reuse, recycle, and we added a fourth because you need four, for repeat. So we can reduce the amount of materials that are leaving our homes, our residents, by composting, vermicomposting, which is composting with worms, harvesting rainwater, recycling, and I put pest management and fertilization on this slide, which many people have questioned me about that. But the reason I did that is we don't want our pest control, our fertilizers, any of that leaving our property. It's there for a purpose and a reason. So when it ends up on the sidewalk or the driveway, and then ultimately into the street and the storm drain and the lake, river, some body of water, and ultimately for us in Tampa Bay, that's a bad thing. So we need to be really careful about what's leaving our residents. Composting is ultimately the best recycling. So it is the controlled decomposition of organic matter. So you can see a picture of a compost bin, and that's the kind of bin that we give away at our composting workshops in Hillsborough County. And you can see in the bottom finished compost or even worm castings. And I always would get in trouble with Dr. Sidney Park Brown when I would be teaching composting, and I would say, hum yum, hew pew. So the reason for that is thinking about humus as opposed to humus. So she was correct that if you compost the right way using the right ingredients, you're going to be fine and you will not have an odor, and that is absolutely true. But I always found humor in hum yum, hew pew. So maybe you will and maybe you won't. And Sydney, I hope you're not listening. So you do need to have a mixture of greens and browns, and you can use finished compost as a soil amendment. You can also make compost tea. We offer rainwater harvesting classes, which is another way to conserve water on your landscape. So you can have a rain barrel whether you have gutters or don't have gutters. So the good part about a rain barrel is you're catching water that would otherwise run off your property. And you can use that water on non-edible plants. Studies have shown that there are chemicals in the water that comes off of any type of a roof structure, and it's not really good. So we do not recommend that you utilize it on something you're going to consume. So the easiest rain barrel is one that has a double lid, and the ones in this picture are a closed top lid. So you can kind of tell by looking at the top of that barrel that it doesn't have a two-part lid. So to me, the double lidded is the easiest because the outer edge unscrews and you can lift off the insert. And then you need a piece of lanai screen over the top, and you screw the top on, you're done, you walk away. This type of barrel that's in the picture, you would have to cut out the top or cut out a piece of the top so that you could lay or have either a downspout or a flexible downspout going over the top of the barrel to capture the water. So just so you know, 1 inch of rain on a 1,000 square foot roof will yield 623 gallons of water. So 55 gallon rain barrel obviously will not cut it. You do need to know that there are some implications if you live in a deed restricted community where they may not allow a rain barrel, or they may have specific instructions on where you can place it, like an air conditioning unit in a deed restricted community needs to be screened with plant materials, things like that. So just bear that in mind. So recycling, we can recycle by sharing cuttings and seeds and plants. So the re's are all of these. We can reseed, relocate, regenerate. We also need to consider dividing and conquering some of our plants, and you'll see what I mean in a few more slides. Grass clippings are great. They're 90% water. Leave them on your yard, on your lawn. You don't need to bag them. They're great right where they are. A lot of people think that grass clippings cause thatch. That's not true. That's caused from fertilizer and water. You can leave your leaves exactly where they fall, and you can use them as mulch or a compost. All right, so how can you reduce plant stress? Well, if you have the right plant in the right place, which obviously is the first Florida-friendly landscaping principle, that is getting you headed in the right direction. Watering efficiently is also critically important, fertilizing appropriately, mulching, and managing yard pests, and we have to do that responsibly. So mulching is great because it helps conserve water. So that means that we can water less. And if we get a rain, that means we need to water even less than that. Mulch is good for suppressing weed growth, and it adds nutrients as it decomposes back into the soil. It enhances the growth of plants, regulates the temperature of the soil, and it really does beautify the landscape. So there are some things that you need to know about mulch. For example, you didn't see cypress mulch mentioned on the slide before. And the reason for that is cypress trees, cypress stands are being cut down in order to make cypress mulch. So the bad news about that is there are a lot of native birds and native animals that depend on the cypress tree stands in order to survive. So the more cypress trees that are eliminated, then the less native wildlife we will have. Unfortunately, cypress mulch is the cheapest mulch that is available unless you're using like a municipal mulch. And the issue with that is that 60-some% of all of the mulch that's sold is cypress, because I believe it's the cheapest. There's rubber mulch and there's rock mulch. So there are issues with both of these. The rubber mulch, there are issues with chemicals in the leachate. And with rock mulch, it does, depending on the rock and how much rock you have, you can create a heat island in your yard. We have an area in our county in Sun City Center where a lot of the communities have mostly rock mulch in their landscapes and very few plants, and it does increase the heat. So turf is a functional plant. Turf is great. It needs to have a purpose. So it could be a play area for children, an area for your dogs, not necessarily cats. I don't know about you, but all pets have to be on a leash if they're outside in Hillsborough County and in the homeowner of deed restricted community where I live. But we all know that doesn't really happen. Turf is great as a play area, a recreation area, and for access to your backyard or one of your side yards. So this is a picture of the Betty S. Walker Discovery Garden, which is in the courtyard of our office. And I have a couple of pictures of this. So this was created in, well, it was thought of before 2003, and it was opened in 2004. And it is not so much a lovely garden right now because we haven't been here to do as much maintenance as needs to be done, but it was a beautiful design that was donated, and we do switch out the plant materials from time to time, but it is a nice place to eat lunch or take a walk when you need a break. We do a Community WaterWise Award program with Tampa Bay Water in the Tampa Bay water area, so that's Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough County. And this is one of the award winners from a couple years ago. Nice design. She was a landscape designer, or is a landscape designer also. And this is another picture of her landscape. Generally, the team always wants to move into the winning home because we love their landscape so much. So as a lazy gardener tip, divide and conquer. So when you have plants that grow in groups and bunches, you can easily divide them and then multiply them throughout your landscape, or trade and barter with your friends. We teach micro irrigation, which is watering efficiently. So you can use micro irrigation in landscape beds. It would be very challenging to try to use it in turf grass because you have lines and then you would be mowing or weed eating them. So it really is not designed for turf. And the good thing is it's gallons per hours, not gallons per minute. So you're saving water utilizing micro. So you can get it in sprays or drip or patio and container kits. So we teach 3 different classes. One is a vegetable micro kit, one is the patio container, and another one is the traditional micro. The parts are interchangeable among the different manufacturers, and it works very well for vegetable gardening. There are other ways that you can water, and of course we did mention rainwater harvesting. There isn't enough pressure in the rain barrel to run micro irrigation or probably even a soaker hose or drip tubing very far anyhow. But if you used a small pump, like an aquarium pump, bigger than aquarium, but not really big, you could probably get more forceful water out of that rain barrel. So you can also water using a hose end nozzle, and they have a lot of really cute decorative turning devices that rotate around and will sprinkle water in your landscape. You can use shower water. You can hydrozone, where you're putting plants that have the same watering needs in the same plant bed. So if you're putting cactus in the same bed where you're putting herbs, that's really one of those. Don't do this, because if you water to make the herbs happy, the cactus will definitely die, and you will watch them melt rather quickly. So appropriate fertilization. You need to know what are the county or the city fertilizer statutes. For us in Hillsborough County, in unincorporated Hillsborough County, you can apply fertilizer in the summer. But in the city of Tampa, you cannot apply fertilizer to your landscape in the summer. So you need to know what are the rules where you live. And you need to apply it during the growing season. You need to have a soil test before you apply it, and then follow the nutrient recommendations based on the soil test. You should have a minimum of 30% slow release fertilizer product. And again, you need to read the label and reread the label and follow the instructions. And you'd want to use slow release. So think about the difference between a quick release and a slow release. So let's just think about it as watering a plant in a container. So if you're going to use a quick release like Miracle Grow or something like that, and you water it, think about using that on your turf grass. So think about the 1 inch of rain, which will go down 12 inches into the soil. So with 1 inch of rain, the fertilizer is already well past the root zone. All right, so you don't need to fertilize monthly any more than you need to use pesticides monthly, but there are companies that offer contracts, and a lot of people have that service, but you really don't need it. Use the UF-IFAS research-based information and follow the directions. Managing yard pests responsibly. I think the biggest issue that people have is they think a bug is one particular thing, and it's not. So you can see the ladybug on the left, and then aphids, and then the Mexican bean beetle on the right. But you first need to identify what is the pest, is it a pest, and then use the least toxic method of control. So read and reread the directions on any environmentally safe solution for pests that you're going to use. Follow the directions. I don't know if Nicole is on this call or not, but we do have a brochure in Hillsborough County, and I think she may have updated it on non-chemical solutions for pests. And if you are on, Nicole, and you want to make a comment on that, feel free. Okay, so you need again to identify them, and there are biting, sucking, and chewing insects, as all of us know. So identification first, control second, and be responsible. BT, spinosad, snail bait, insecticidal soap. I have a big bed in my easement of perennial peanut, and the only pest that I have are snails and occasionally slugs. So once upon a time, I did use slug and snail bait, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's environmentally safe. But then I saw male cardinals in that bed, and they're eating the snails and the slugs. So to me, I would rather see that beautiful red bird in with my beautiful green and golden plants than worry about treating it. So I just leave it. All right, so again, manage yard pests responsibly, and this is not responsible. He is loaded to kill whatever there may be in the landscape. And when we kill the bad bugs, chances are we are also killing some of the good bugs. So that means that we are taking on the responsibility, which we don't need. So we can reduce the amount of landscape clippings if we have the right plant in the right place. So when we're thinking about that, of course, we're thinking about site conditions, sun, shade, the soil, the mature size of the plant. So you can see that several of these plants are very close to the house and will definitely be blocking sun on that lanai area. And maybe you want a shady lanai, but right plant, right place. So think about this. We just recently redid 4 beds outside of our office. And we were very fortunate to get a grant from the FFL state office and DEP. And what we did, as all of us should do, but many of us don't, and we've all been guilty of this in the past, we go to the store and we buy the plants and we don't know where we're going to put them or how many we really need. And then we get home and we are befuddled. How do you like that word? I know I'm going to hear about that, Wendy. So you need to know the number of plants based on the mature size of the plants. And that depends on the garden dimensions. So there is a little bit of work in advance, but it's going to save you a whole lot of time in the end. Overplanting. Yeah, well, there I am again. I hate to admit it, but yeah, that was my yard at one point in time. So we do need to prune if we overplant. So we can prune to train a plant, to remove insects, deadheaded after weather, and increase air circulation. But I don't really think that that's a very good example. We can repurpose. So this was a pair of shoes that I really liked, but you know, shoes only last so long. So I was writing an article about Valentine plants and other things that people might want for Valentine's Day that were plant related. So I decided to spray paint these black shoes red. So you can use them as a container, and I have some tillandsia in that shoe. And one of my friends said, I have to have that shoe, so I gave it to her. And then somebody else with UF said, I have to have that shoe. And I said, well, I have another one, so let me finish spray painting it. So I gave that one away. So you can be as creative as you want to be. I have a coffee pot on my front porch that I use as a planter. You can use yard art, which I have on another screen. Speaking of screens, you could use a window screen and you could hang different plants on that. I have 2 towel racks that I purchased that are in my office at work, and I have African violets on the towel racks, which really is kind of cute. I do have some shutters that a friend of mine, Lisa, gave me when she moved out of county to the northern part of the state. And we talked about how tillandsias on those shutters. Well, they're still in the garage, Lisa, but I will get to that at some point in time. So a good thing if you have cold weather or you get bad storms is I have wheeled clothing rack. So it's very easy to pull it out of your house onto your front porch. And when the weather gets really cold, or if you're having pressure washing done or whatever it is, you can just hang those hanging plants on that clothing rack and then relocate it to the garage. And they'll be fine in the garage for a few days, whether it's cold weather or some work you're having done on the exterior of your house. So we have a gentleman in our area that makes recycled yard art. So all of these pieces are pieces that he has created from multiple things that he collects. So you can see that Sparky, which is a porcupine made out of spark plugs, is pretty cute. And the fish was made out of a meat grinder. And the gator was made out of a shovel and a spring. And then the black cat was made out of all kinds of different things. So we do a workshop in Hillsborough County called Recycle Your Yard and Recycled Yard Art. And we talk about how people can reuse and recycle things in their yard. And then attendees can drive through our parking lot at a specific designated day and time, and we give them one small piece of recycled yard art for attending. So, a few more lazy gardener tips. You can propagate for yourself or others, attend garden club, plant or seed events, and repeat your successes. Hopefully we're not repeating our failures. So I do like the term chunk it. And what I mean by chunk it is we need to know the big picture, but we don't have to do the big picture. We don't have to complete everything at the same time. So let's say that you have a landscape bed and it needs to be weeded. And after it's weeded, you know you need to mulch it. And maybe you want to remove some plants that aren't doing that well and replace them with look like that picture of one point in time. You may need to remove a lot of plants. So whatever it is you want to do, think about it in a good chronological order and then move from there. So I had a friend that hated to clean her office. So she had one of those cute little tomato timers that we used to have a million years ago. And she would set it for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, and go into her office. And she would clean up piles in her office and file and pay bills and whatever needed to be done. And when the timer went off, she would stop unless she decided she wanted to continue on the project. So I do that in my yard too. And sometimes I do it with the chunk it method, which is using a timer. And sometimes I use it with the paper method, where I have a list every week or every day of what I want to accomplish. And you always have those carryovers, but if you can do one thing on your list that is really important and then do two things the next day while you have a carryover and something else on your list, you will eventually get everything done. But you can also get help. So, lazy gardening, divide and relocate your plants. So you're not spending money, which is good. You're not using gas, so you're still saving money. You're not shopping, so you're saving money. But if you love to shop, maybe you need to go out and spend some money. So if you want to continue being a lazy gardener, you can plant slow growers, wide spreaders, drought tolerant, and use lazy pest management by purchasing or receiving pest and disease resistant plants. Now, there's a couple of lazy gardening tips. If you purchase high quality tools, you can resharpen them as needed. But if you don't ever sharpen them, you're really not doing your tools any good, and you're really probably having a jagged cut while you're making a cut on pruning. And gloves are really important. You're going to save time cleaning your fingernails. Even with gloves, many times my fingernails still look bad. So a little tip on cleaning your fingernails after your hands are really dirty, use a vegetable brush. If you get those scrubby vegetable brushes in the store, the ones that aren't soft, but they're a little more stiff bristled, they work really well. Don't use it on vegetables after you use it on your fingers. All right, so what else can you do? Well, you can share. Make sure that if you're sharing, plastic or terracotta pots, that they're cleaned. And most time that means using some bleach and some water to make sure that they'll be good for the next planting. You can share packaging. So a lot of times I use those packing peanuts that are styrofoam in the bottom of a big pot because it makes it a whole lot lighter instead of filling it with potting soil or some rocks on the bottom. And that way you're able to move it much more easily. You can reuse newspaper, grocery bags if you're walking your dog, or if you need it to clean your cat box. That's a good idea also. And I have 2 worm bins that are not handmade, more commercial, that I have on my lanai. So I save the worm tea and the worm castings. I save the tea in milk jugs or juice containers. I have far more than would fill up a lot of water bottles, but Lisa Meredith in our office that teaches composting and worm composting has at least 3 worm bins outside of our office and 2 inside her office, but it does not smell. If you do it right with the correct mixture, there is no smell. So I think she's got a worm composting workshop on Zoom coming up. No, I don't think it's on Zoom. It's less than 10 people. So I think it's going to be in person coming up soon. So they make their own containers and they get a cup full of worms and instructions. So the ideas are endless on what you can do and how you can create a more Florida-friendly landscape. But fortunately or not fortunately, this presentation is not endless. So that's my perennial peanut. And my contact information. So Wendy,
That's
do we
great,
have questions?
Lynn, we have lots of questions.
Oh
And lots
boy.
of awesome
So,
comments.
So should I close out? Should I leave this slide up or close it out?
I would like, you can leave this slide up. I would leave it up if that's okay with you.
Okay.
At least for a little bit. Let me hit you with
Yep,
some
it's
questions.
fine with me.
Carol Barnum asks, is cypress mulch made from the scraps of harvested wood that is used for lumber, or are cypress trees harvested specifically to be processed into mulch?
I think the answer to that question is both, but we don't know. We don't know the answer. We don't know, in this bag of mulch, was it specifically harvested for mulch or is it a timber byproduct?
Yeah. So
because of that, University of Florida's position is that it is not really a renewable resource.
right, it's not sustainable because, and one of the other reasons is that they're going into wetlands to harvest and they're not replanting. And it's been my observation that they really are chopping down cypress trees and putting them in bags of mulch most of the time. Janice Spencer chimes in and says Melaleuca is invasive and they're harvesting them to remove them. And so, yeah, so if you're choosing Melaleuca mulch, that's a sustainable resource. So that's good.
It is.
Then this one is probably going to have you go back in your slides, Lynn, because Patrick Kearney is asking on the fertilizer label, what are the words that designate slow release? And you had a label up there, and I think that we can probably go back and show that. There.
All right, so on the bottom, it's showing nutrient sources have been coded to provide 16% coated slow release nitrogen, 7% available phosphate, and 10% potash.
So this is telling us that 16% is slow release nitrogen, 16% of the 19%. Okay. And also sometimes we'll see
As I
words,
read it, yes. Yes.
and sometimes we'll see words that say water soluble or water insoluble, and water insoluble is slow release, right? Okay. All right, thank you for that. All right, so we've got some other questions. Kathy Oliver wants to know, did you drill drainage holes in that high heel shoe?
No, I did not. But the reason I did not is because it's a tillandsia and it doesn't need to be in dirt and it does have roots. But when I gave them to the two people that I gave them to, I just said, all you need to do is dip that plant, the tillandsias, in water, dip it, pull it out, and let it dry before you put it back in the shoe. So they really like, it's in the bromeliad family. So the cool thing about bromeliads is they're about as low maintenance as you can get for a plant. So they don't need even soil for their roots. I have some in a plastic container with a brick in the bottom and they're still producing pups. So they have to have water in their cups. And the issue with water in the cup is that will attract mosquito larvae, and then they will become female biting, sucking mosquitoes. But there is a product that you can get that is for bromeliads and other, it's a granular, and you can put it in the cups of your bromeliads.
Right, that's a larvicide, BTI, right?
Does that answer your question, Kathy? Yeah.
Okay, Vicki Denton wanted to mention that cypress mulch has become loaded with large pieces that don't break down. And that's true, I see that. And another question is, how do I use compost in an established mulch garden?
Well, you can use it in a couple of different ways. You could top dress it with compost and with watering, and eventually it will work its way into the soil, or you can dig it into the soil. So when we redid the landscape beds out in front of the extension office, we hired a company to dig out. All we had was sand and fill. So we had to have it dug out about 8 inches deep. And then we purchased compost, but you need to know the composition of the compost. And we purchased that, and then we had people dig the compost into that bed. And so we dug the compost into the bed, then we planted the plants in the mixture of the compost and what was left in the bed, and put mulch on top, and then added the irrigation.
Right.
So you can either top dress it and it will eventually work its way in, but if you're in a bigger hurry, you might want it closer to the root zone, but it's still going to provide nutrients to the root zone.
Right. So, you know, the little,
but you don't want to take compost. Yes. Yes.
I use the claw thing and I scrape
That'll
back
work.
and I pack it in there. So you do that too?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I'm pretty lazy, so I claw my cats. They claw me, but I don't really use the claw on gardening. I don't use the claw on my cats.
Okay.
No.
So, and Joyce says, great suggestions. Thank you. So the Carol Stovall, now hold on to something, Lynn, because I know this is going to blow your chair back. Will spraying plants with Dawn soap solution, will spraying plants with a Dawn soap solution help plants with fungus?
I don't think so. A sooty mold, if you have a sooty mold, I had a gardenia that I didn't think I would ever get the sooty mold issue cured, but I used a solution of dish soap and I only used Dawn, so that's what I used. But in the sun, that could be damaging to the leaves because of what's in Dawn. But I did it anyhow because that's the only soap I use. So it's Dawn and water and a little bit of oil. So like, don't use your expensive olive oil, but you can use your cheaper cooking oil. But you need to get the top of the leaves and the bottom of the leaves, so you'd need like a hose end sprayer. But I'm not aware of what you're recommending. Wendy, are you?
We don't recommend Dawn because of the degreaser. And I know that maybe, some people, that's all they have, but I would really appreciate if they didn't use Dawn or ever recommend that one. But, and because, so here I am, I got to put on my state master gardener hat. We have to recommend pesticides that have a label. And so we would always recommend insecticidal soap that carries a label. And then the soap in that product does not have a degreaser, and it helps to, that's really where we need to be. Is it soap and oil and water? Yes, it is. But it has the label on there, and we recommend products with the label.
Correct.
And so.
Valid point, Wendy. Thank you.
Yeah. And so that's, but sometimes at a lazy gardener's house, we know things happen, but we know what we're recommending with officially recommending. Okay. Gaytree White, she uses Castile soap. Yeah, I mean, that's what we do, but we only recommend insecticidal soap. Okay, so I have a hard question for you, Lynn, and it's on composting. And I wouldn't ask you if I didn't know you knew. It's from Basim in Seminole County. What is the right carbon to nitrogen ratio in your compost pile?
Well, we've had many discussions on this, and I'm part of a team which is working on Florida-friendly landscaping edibles. And a composting publication was just released on EDIS in the last week or so. And that's saying 2-to-1 brown to greens. And if you want to delve much deeper, by whatever contents you're putting in the pile, you could have a different ratio. So if you're using paper versus dried leaves or wood chips, and you're mixing it with kitchen scraps versus tree trimmings or fresh leaves, there are publications that make it, in my opinion, significantly more challenging for people to do. So what we tried to do on the FFL edibles team was make it easier and use that general recommendation that it was 2-to-1 brown to green.
That's a good ballpark, right? So let me see, I've got some other good stuff in here. And this is a good question. Joan Starr and another person also asked this, want to be sure that the rain barrel water collection without coming from gutters can be used on edible plants and vegetables. So if it's not going through the gutters, can you use it on edible plants and vegetables?
Well, is it still coming off the roof?
I think it is.
And if the answer is yes, then the response to that is actually no. And I did a short research, limited research paper when I was working on my master's about the chemicals and the contents that are in rainwater harvested off of various roofing structures. I had hoped maybe we would be able to set up something at our office and, have a roof with different types of tile or metal or shingle. But every single one of them, according to the 4 studies that I read and summarized, said that there were issues with all of them on different chemicals that are in the water. And some chemicals stay on top of the water. Some chemicals go into the bottom of the water. And for a rain barrel, if you used a device called a first flush device, that gets rid of a significant amount of the chemicals that would be contained from the roof. But just think about everything else that's on your roof. You've got twigs and leaves, and you have cockroaches up there, and chances are birds and maybe a possum or who knows what.
Squirrels.
And all of the feces, all the feces from those ultimately end up in your gutters and then potentially in your rain barrels. So if you wanted to consider a first flush device, that might be an option, but even the studies showed that you would probably have to use UV light and maybe chemicals. So if anybody wants to email me and would like a copy of that recap, I'm more than happy to provide it.
Okay.
But we recommend that people don't do that.
Okay. And Joan let us know that in this case, it's not coming from the roof, but directly into the barrel. So if it's not going over the roof, Joan, you're in good shape. Got a question about mulch.
Yes.
Evan says his favorite mulch is pine needles / pine straw. What is your opinion?
I think pine straw is great. It is a byproduct of the timber industry, so that's good because it's being reused. It does settle kind of quickly, but I like that fact. Some people don't like the look of it. Some think that it doesn't suppress weeds as much as other mulch, but I personally like it a lot. And if you have a lot of pine trees in your yard, then that's another opportunity for you to capture those, rake them up, and use them in other places. But it's a very nice mulch. And when we were talking about mulch earlier, and Wendy, I think you mentioned about you get a lot of big chunks sometimes in mulch and cypress. When you're buying mulch, think about the size of the pieces of the mulch, because you can get mulch in really large pieces that with a heavy rain, they won't end up in your landscape beds. They'll be on the sidewalk, in the driveway. They'll also be in your turf grass, but some places sell what's known as a super mini, which really isn't as small as it actually sounds like it is, but it's smaller pieces that will not wash all over your sidewalk, driveway, turf, everything else. There is a product called Fines, F-I-N-E-S, which I purchased once, and it's the most beautiful product. It's almost like soil, but it's not as heavy as soil. It's gorgeous, and it will fill in with all the mulch that you already have in place, but it decomposes within like 6 months. So the good news is it's gorgeous. The bad news is then do you want to mulch every 6 months and spend more money, or do you want to mulch maybe once every 9 or 12 months? And I, as a cheap and lazy gardener, took the super minis.
Okay, Lynn, someone's asking for your contact information again. So if you could go to the last slide while we are doing the rest of the questions. Rosalie asked, how do you spell fines? Yep. And Rosalie, you spelt it correctly, F-I-N-E-S, F-I-N-E-S. Carol Evans wanted everyone to know that Dr. Adam Dale has a good document on explaining why it's important to use formulated products for our insecticidal soaps and neems or in oils. Sue Cardoza wants to know what's the proper way of using neem oil. Another person put in the chat that you, as a insect growth regulator, neem should not be applied on flowering plants in case pollinators pick it up. But if you want to talk a little bit about neem, that'd be great, Lynn.
I honestly have not used neem, so I don't know the answer to that question, but whatever it says on the instructions, you need to read the label and you need to follow the directions. Perfect. So that's the bottom line.
Perfect answer. I have a couple other questions, but this one is important. Vicky says Melaleuca mulch isn't so easy to find. Any suggestions? It's really hit or miss. It comes and goes. I saw it the other day at Lowe's. I also saw hardwood pallet mulch at Lowe's yesterday. So it kind of is seasonal. What have you seen, Lynn?
That's exactly the same experience that we have here. Sometimes you can find it, but most of the time it is more challenging. And it's unfortunate because it's a good thing. You're paying more, maybe, but do you want to spend less and destroy a habitat? And the answer is no.
Okay, the Bushel
But
Stop
if you
sells
check
it
the
in,
internet, call,
yeah,
go ahead.
but the Bushel Stop sells it in Broward County. And you can also, we as master gardeners, we can drive demand or supply in these stores. And so if you let them know that we would like to see that more, and that we recommend to the clientele that, you know, this is a sustainable mulch that we like, then they oftentimes will bring it in. So let me see. Oh, somebody did want to know about, Gwen said she missed the comment on monthly lawn care in spring. Will you please repeat that?
Yes, the comment about monthly lawn care, fertilization, not so much mowing maybe, other than we really don't need to mow in the winter when lawn is dormant. So give yourself a break or save yourself some money. But you don't need to fertilize every month of the year, and you don't need to use pesticides every month of the year. But there are companies that sell that service. And I see signs in my neighbors' yards month after month after month because they're paying people to do it. But the reason that they're doing that, I believe, is because they don't understand that they don't need it. Now, do the people that have their turf grass fertilized while it's dormant in the winter and they're paying for it, does their turf look better than mine? Yes, it does. But turf grass in the winter in Florida is not supposed to be a bright green. It's supposed to be a little more browny green than green. So I think part of that is people think it's the right thing to do and they're willing to pay for that service, but they're not really doing the right thing. We don't wake up bears in the winter to feed them.
No, but they might be hungry, but we don't do it.
Yeah, they'll be hungry, all right.
Then somebody said, you know you're a master gardener when you have to wash your hair to get your fingernails clean. So that's true.
That is so true.
Some people
I love
are
it.
saying that they put plastic gloves underneath their gardening gloves to keep their fingernails clean. So it's interesting. I tell you, we all have our little tricks.
I've heard of people putting soap, like take a bar of soap and run your fingernails over the soap to get the soap under your fingernails.
Yes, somebody did put that in the chat box for sure. So let's see. There was some talk about not mushroom tea, compost tea versus worm bin leachate. Could you compare and contrast compost tea versus worm bin leachate?
Well, I think that the liquid coming out of the worm bin is really the compost tea, because if you're doing a compost pile, you really aren't going to see that leachate. It's leaching into the ground. So it's going to be at the bottom of the pile as the liquid and the solids and the liquids end up decomposing together. But in a worm bin and in a worm container professional, you have a spigot on one side of it. And when you open the spigot, then you're going to get the liquid of the food and the newspaper decomposing. So that would be your compost tea. Now, if you wanted to make compost tea out of a compost pile, you could take a gunny sack, a burlap sack. If anybody has pantyhose anymore, you could take the greens and the browns from your compost pile and put it in any of those things, tie off the top and put it in a 5-gallon bucket of water and leave it there until you see the color change. So it could be the next day, it could be a couple days later. If you're as lazy as I am, it could be a week later, but when it changes colors and the liquid is brown, then it's considered to be like a compost tea. And you can use that to water your plants. So you're feeding and watering them at the same time.
Right. That's great. Julie Roberts says they would make compost tea by putting nettles and comfrey in a bucket and covering with water. I think there's a lot of different recipes for compost tea. I would do 5 pounds of finished compost, 1 quart of fish emulsion, and 20 gallons of water in a giant garbage can, and mix that up with a stick and water with that. And that was something I was taught at a University of Florida vegetable gardening class that I took. So that's, there's, I always say, if you ask 15 people how to compost, you're going to get 20 different answers. And I think the same goes for compost tea as well. So someone asked, what do you think about black cow manure or compost?
I think you need to check. You need to check the composition. We have used it at our office before, and when we redid the beds on the exterior, we checked a couple of different places and decided that we would be better served, and so would the plants, if we purchased in bulk from some other place.
Okay.
So do your research.
Okay. And we have somebody asking about the worms for the compost. Are those red wigglers? Which worms are recommended for the vermicomposting?
That's what we use. The red wigglers seem to be the best, and they multiply very, very quickly. I can tell you that it's took me hours and hours and hours to harvest my red wigglers from 2 compost bins, but I didn't want to give up on the worms that were in the very bottom of the bin and start over. I wanted to make sure that I was harvesting as many as I could. So it takes a little bit of time, but it is well worth it. And if you purchase a commercial bin, depending on where you get it, you'll get the worms with it and the bin, and it's wrapped in a cardboard that you use as part of the worm composting. And then there are different layers, like different floors in a house. And I only had one issue once with one of those commercial bins, and the spigot came out. So when the spigot came out, everything that was on the other side of the spigot came out. So I had a really big, nice brown disaster on my lanai.
Oh my gosh.
So I can laugh about it now, but it did take a little cleaning up. But it is really worth it. It's amazing what you can do with the worm castings.
Absolutely.
My plants are much happier.
Yeah, it's very bioactive. It's got a lot of nutrient, a lot of good microbes in it. So it's excellent. I think this is going to be our last question. And she said, you mentioned the granular mosquito bait. Would this be safe in reclaimed air conditioner water for edibles? And there's only one thing to say about that, and I'll let Lynn say it.
And that is no. The answer to that is no. If you think back, and many of you maybe don't remember back this far, but in Pennsylvania somewhere, Philadelphia or Pittsburgh years and years ago, there was an issue with the air conditioning condensate, and a lot of people died because of that, or several people in a hotel. So air conditioning condensate really is not good to be used on plant materials. Just use water out of your spigot, harvest your rainwater, but the answer is no.
Okay. And then
And the issue
point
is
about
Legionnaire's disease.
and
It
the
was
point about the
Legionnaire's
mosquito,
disease. Yeah.
the mosquito
Sorry.
product too is that we've got to follow the law. The label's the law on that. And it doesn't say you can use in air conditioning water and then apply to a garden. So we have to follow the label always. Okay, this really, and yeah, Bobby England said Legionnaire's disease. She remembered. And Gloria Flores, this is really your last question, and I like this question. Is not the rubber compost too hot to use around the trees, the rubber mulch?
It will heat up. Yes. So no, we don't recommend that you use rubber mulch.
Right.
We recommend that you do not use it because it will heat up as rocks will heat up. And it's not adding anything. Neither are rocks. They're not adding any nutrients to the soil. And it's not really a good decision.
Right. Okay, Lynn, there's one thing that I'm curious about too that people have asked, and tell us about this recycled art. Drive by, pick up some art at the Hillsborough County Extension Office. People are going to be traveling from all the counties in Florida to come get a piece of recycled art.
Well, we haven't opened it up beyond Hillsborough County, but you know, we had, as we still are experiencing COVID, and we had a couple of vendors that we've worked with when we do things like Florida Friendly Landscaping 101, and last time we did it in person, we had 115 people packed in our conference center. And of course, we couldn't do it face-to-face this past year, so the numbers were way down, but we wanted people to get some of the cool things that they had received in the past. And these two vendors rely on plant exhibits and venues and plant events around the county and in other counties, and there were none. So there weren't any big plant events, any art events, anything. So they've been working with us very closely for years, and we felt bad for them. So we created two events that they could be vendors for. So Andy Hamilton is the crazy guy that made all the things that I have purchased from him that were on those slides. And he makes a lot of smaller ones, and we give the smaller ones away. And then the last time we did it, we didn't charge for the workshop. This time we're going to charge $5, but every household gets one small item of recycled yard art, and then the money goes to Andy. So we do the same thing with Dennis of D&D Growers, because that's what they use. So we created, they needed the income, and they grow plants, and they're very reasonable and nice, and they've always helped us. So we created an ornamental herbs presentation and give away plants at that. So we have a big parking lot. After the presentation, we have a specific date and time they can pick up the plants or the recycled yard art, and they drive their cars through our parking lot. They have to come in one way. We have an attendee list. We check them off the list. They get their items, and then they drive away. So they have to have a mask on. We have to have a mask on. Hand them their stuff. They leave. So it's been very effective. And that was not my idea. Our director, Stephen Gran, actually came up with that idea, and I think it was a great idea. So
yeah, that sounds nice. So for those of you who have more questions for Lynn, you've got her email and you've got her phone number. There's only 285 people that are going to call you, Lynn, about that. So that's that'll be a nice way to spend the rest of the afternoon. Lynn, thank you so much. This is such great information, and I love the way you kind of organized it and told the story. And I think you have inspired more people to do even more Florida-friendly landscaping. So I thank you all, and we will see you next month for the webinar. And good luck with Better Impact. I think you're going to love it. All right, take care, everybody.
bye.